Thank
If
you.
you want a second one, there is one hanging out.
Okay. We'll try to avoid it. Thank you, Chris. Well, I think we'll get started. Thank you all for coming in on this gorgeous day. I was walking my dog and I almost kept walking, but I wanted to come and see all of you this afternoon. We have a wonderful program. We have, I think it's 7 love stories, and they are held over from the day we called the snowstorm. Sorry about that. Mother Nature didn't really agree with us that day, but by then it was already canceled. So I'm glad you could be here today to hear those stories. And there are a few more. So if we were to have another Sip Talk Learn in April, would that be okay with everybody? Okay, so we'll try to find a date. It's a very busy month, but we'll try to get it because we have like 5 or 6 people so far that have signed up. Thank you all for coming. I think most of you have been here before. And the rules are basically 3 minutes, which is really tough. And RL will be keeping time. And when you start, you can start with a little introduction. And I've told everybody this, but I hope you will introduce yourself so those at home know who you are. And then when we have opening up for questions, everyone, if you just raise your hand and then ask the speaker what your question is, and they will repeat it for those at home so they can hear it. This is the end of our 6th year doing this, and I don't know how many, I should do a count sometime, but well over 100 people have shared the microphone, so it's really a thrill. And we've really gotten to know each other better because of it, and so I thank you all for coming today. Let me get my list. I also wanted to thank Chris, who's doing our AV today. He's a great, thank you, Chris. So just to give you the pecking order here, we have Sarah Bishop, then Kelly, then Kit, then Elaine, then Nancy Henderson, and Corey Flint, and Steve Cropper will be our love stories. So Sarah Bishop, take it away.
So I'm Sarah Reese Bishop, and this is not my love story. This is my mom and my dad's love story. Millville, Pennsylvania, March 30th, 1940. Dear Susan, your letter was very interesting. I am blonde, blue-eyed, and 5'6" tall, and in the 9th grade in Millville High School. My dad has a partnership in a grist mill, flour, feed, and grain. I have a brother 16 and 2 sisters aged 8 and 11. I like to ski. I like to dance, although I am no Fred Astaire. I like the hit parade and Kay Kaiser. Glenn Miller is my favorite orchestra leader. I have received about 25 pen pal letters and have about 2 or 3 pen pals. How many do you have? If you have any questions you'd like to ask, do so. It gives me something to say in your letters. Write soon. Sincerely yours, Dick Reese, Millville, Pennsylvania. Dear Dick, I enjoyed your letter, lots. The drawing at the last was very good. Don't forget to send me some more. You spoke of the places you had been. I spend most of my vacations at the cottage at the beach. I went to Florida one Christmas, but I don't care to ever go again. It was too much of the same thing there, water, sand, and palms. I am very fond of tennis. I don't see how you ever learned to ski. Here in the sunny South, we never have enough snow. Well, there's no place to ice skate either. Will you please send me a picture of yourself if you can? Yours truly, Susan Ann. It was a love story that began in a 1940 Fabulous Funnies comic book. I'm not sure if he chose her name or she chose his from the list of children wanting a pen pal on the back cover of the comic book, but I do note that the choice was just the right one. She was a 14-year-old from the Tar Heel state of North Carolina, and he a 15-year-old from the Buckeye state of Pennsylvania. They began to write back and forth again. Not long into their letter writing, it was realized that the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad ran between their home states. So the dreamy-eyed kitten, Chessie, the mascot of the railway, became her pen name. He chose Admiral. No doubt there was a story there, but I don't know it. Perhaps it was an aspiration as years later he joined the Navy. For 10 years, their letters, full of stories of family, friends, travels, favorite books, and music, traveled back and forth over the Mason-Dixon line. Hundreds and hundreds of letters, and I have every one, though I have only read a few. It was their story, not mine. Eventually, they themselves traveled back and forth to meet the family of the other, friendship deepening into love. On a hot August day in the Main Street Methodist Church in Reidsville, North Carolina, Chessie married her Admiral. And for the next 5 years, their love story only deepened. Their love story came full circle when Admiral shopped online for Chessie merchandise from the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway website for her 78th birthday gifts. When the gifts arrived, he wrapped them with great care and tucked them safely away on the floor of his closet. And from his hospital bed, in a quiet moment, just a few weeks after the gifts arrived, he shared with her where she would find them. They were to be opened on her birthday. As promised, Chessie opened them on her birthday. Her Admiral had died just the day before. Did I make it? So here's Chessie, and this was one of the gifts, along with a blanket that had Chessie on it, and a nightshirt. So. Thank you for no questions. That was speed reading.
Sarah, I have a question. Did you always know the story of how your parents met? Or did you disclose it once, but then
I did, but I don't know. Oh, did I always know that they were pen pals? I did, and I honestly don't remember when I knew. I think it was my grandmother who told me at some point that she had actually helped my mother when she was going through the list of names of kids who wanted pen pals, and she chose the one farthest away because she thought, well, if she writes this young man, there's no chance that they'll ever meet. Well, they did.
Hi everyone, my name's Kelly Kerber. Today I'm going to share a love story featuring my paternal grandmother Alma. So Alma grew up in a small town in western Ohio. It was a little farm town. She was one of 7. She had 5 brothers and 1 sister. She went on to marry my grandfather, and that's not the love story I'm talking about, but it does still involve her. And then she had 4 boys. So Alma had been around a lot of boys in her time, so she had to be pretty tough. She could get down with some serious shenanigans, too. She kept everybody on their toes. So she was a very driven individual. She and my grandpa started the first drive-through carryout in Ohio, which if you don't know what that is, it's like a drive-through 7-Eleven. And in those days, it was probably beer and cigarettes that people were purchasing, and they didn't have to get out of their car. So then shortly after, they had been married quite a while, the kids were grown. In 1977, they decided they were done with the small town, and they decided to go to fabulous Las Vegas. So while there, unfortunately, Grandpa passed a little too soon, but Grandma decided she was going to stay out there. And that's a good spot for Grandma. She was fashionable. She was, in her younger days, she could be noted wearing hot pants and a matching wig, even though she didn't need one. And then when she went on a little later in life, she was always noted to wear a color-coordinated either velour or silken tracksuit with matching heels and a hat. She was known for her hats. The Vegas way, I would say. So Grandma decided she wanted to learn to play poker. So she worked in a poker room, and fast forward, she became a successful, an actual professional poker player. Somewhere in the midst of all this, one time, so my mom and my dad divorced when I was very young, but my dad's mom and my mother remained very good friends. So one day, Alma called and said, Janice, who is my mom, why don't you bring Kelly out and visit? So we went out to visit, and we did all the Vegas things, and Grandma said, oh, by the way, my friend Flo is coming over. She's going to babysit tonight. There's somebody I want you to meet. So now remember this. My grandmother is setting up her ex-daughter-in-law on a blind date. So they go out. My mom meets Jack. They have a very nice time. Jack falls quickly in love with my mom, proposes to her after, well, they went on that date in Vegas. He was from Ohio, so a couple weeks later he flew back, asked her on another date, and proposed to her. That's not the love story I'm talking about. Mom said, you know what, I'm not quite there right now, and I don't think I'm ready to move Kelly to Las Vegas from Ohio. So they parted ways. A couple years later, Grandma calls and says, oh, hey, guys, I'm getting married. Grandma, who are you marrying? I'm marrying Jack. Like, the one you tried to set my mom up with? Yeah, that Jack. Said, okay. And so there was a lot of drama surrounding this relationship. He was younger than 3 of my grandma's sons. So they're like, what is up with this guy? What is, he's a gold digger, even, which wasn't, the thing. But he ended up taking very good care of my grandma till the day she died, even though for the 20 years or so, years that they were married, hearing, I tried to pawn him off on Kelly's mom. I tried to pawn him off on my hairdresser. I tried to pawn him off on my nail person. And finally, I just decided to keep him. And she was a successful poker player. She actually won the World Series of Poker in 1989 for ladies 7-card stud. Any questions? There might be a lot. Do you play poker? I do. The question was, do I play poker? Yes. So if anybody is hosting poker games, please let me know. Okay, thank you.
She's fine. It's like nothing's ever happened. Yeah, they're quick. They bounce back quickly. Yeah, and so far I'm unscathed. So glad to be here. So I get to tell at least my side of our love story. Well, and I'm focusing on the meet cute because that's kind of a fun part of it. So sometimes when people meet Nate and I, they assume we met in divinity school, or if they find out we went to college together, they assume we met in college, and then sometimes I try to kind of choose the right moment to say, well, we actually met in high school, but it's a long story, so. Yeah, here's the short version. All right, so. It was November 2002, and I was backstage at the dress rehearsal for the High School Musical. That year we were doing How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which is kind of a funny choice for a high school musical. It's sort of like a satirical takedown of 1950s corporate America, but the music's great. And I had been somewhat disappointingly cast in the chorus. I had 2 lines. But the upside of that was that I had plenty of time between big group numbers to hang out backstage and make lots of friends. So there I was. I can remember it vividly. I was walking down what was the science corridor in Wellesley High School. I had just changed in to my blue leotard and sequin skirt for my big scene with the 2 lines. And there was a group of mostly junior girls, like a gaggle of girls, giggling with one guy by the name of Matt Anderson, who'd become a platonic friend of mine because we'd been randomly assigned as dance partners in the somewhat problematic musical number called A Secretary Is Not a Toy, which somehow doesn't quite work 20 years later, but I guess it was, against workplace sexual assault, so maybe it was ahead of its time. Anyway, there they are, laughing in the corner as I walk past them. They sort of, in unison, look at each other, this group, and go, "Oh, what about Kit?" I was like, "What about Kit?" And it turns out they'd been racking their brains trying to figure out who to set Matt's best friend up with, because the next month there was a big dance coming up called the Wellesley Cotillion, which wasn't like a coming out party. It was more like a winter prom that happened, but it was only for juniors and seniors. So this was somewhat of a big deal for a sophomore like myself. Underclassmen could only be invited at the invitation of an upperclassman. So I was intrigued to hear about this sensitive soccer player who went to an all-boys school and didn't know any girls, hence the collective effort. So a few days later, opening night, there was rumor that Matt's friend was in the audience. I do my scene, my 1-2 lines, nailed it. I come into the lobby of the high school after the show, and sure enough, there's our friend Matt, who introduces and says, "Kit, you have to meet Nate." We fell into a love that was sort of way more mature than we were. We were 15 and 16 at the time. Our first date was a group date to White Mountain Creamery ice cream, and we were both so shy that by the end, one of the other girls in the group had to say, "So are you going to ask her to the dance or not?" And he finally got it out. And then we went to see that terrible horror film, The Ring, about like the demon girl who comes out of a well. It was terrifying, but it was a good excuse to put his arm around me. And at that date, we showed up hilariously in matching corduroy jackets with like fake fur trim. So a lot of moments like that. Anyway, we ended up growing up together. We ended up going to college together. He was a year ahead of me. We never would have expected that we would have ended up at divinity school and serving a church together with 3 children. So I guess you could say it was serendipitous, and you could look at our story and say, it's how you succeed in love without really trying. But the truth is, we try really hard, actually. Whether it's, reminding each other we're on the same team, with the help of our village, finding opportunities to just be ourselves and continue to explore and go on adventures together. And whether it's locking eyes in the middle of cleaning up from yet another sick kid in the middle of the night, just remembering that we're in it together. Any questions? There's a lot more to the story, but that probably speaks for itself. Yeah.
Next time we'll have him tell his side.
Exactly.
Was he a poet back then?
He was a poet, and in fact, that next year, I'm looking at my mom who's here. I remember he was selected to go to Breadloaf for like a high school, from his high school. So he went up to Breadloaf at Middlebury for a week. And at that point, this was pre-cell phones, and he called my home phone landline collect. And that was an expensive phone call, but it was worth it, yeah. Yes, he was a poet. And that was intriguing. You didn't meet too many poet soccer players, so, yeah. Oh, one more in the back, yes. Did we both decide to go to divinity school? Eventually, yes. So well, we were together at the time. So, and my mother is an ordained United Church of Christ minister. So I grew up in the church. Nate, however, did not grow up in the church. However, that I think it was that Christmas that we first met. He came to church to see me. So, that was part of the story. But he had his own journey and sort of journey into spirituality and religion in college. And they coincided, but they were separate sort of spiritual journeys. Then he felt a call to divinity school. We both moved to New Haven. And then during his orientation, I sat in the chapel and went, oh no, I'm going to have to do this. But I had to figure out my own, where was my own call versus his. And so, longer story. But yes, then we ended up graduating together from Yale Divinity School. Yeah. All right, on to the next one. Thanks, everybody.
So this is different than the others, but I wrote about love and loss. A year ago last week, I lost my most special beloved friend. Her name was Zinpaz, a spoonful of sugar, but I called her Moxie. And of course she was a dog, because who would love me more than my dog? She loved me on days I wasn't even likable. She loved me above all else. It's true that my husband, who I also love, would call 911 if he found me passed out on the floor. My dog would curl up by me, maybe howl for help, and eventually, if no one came along, might eat me. But only because dogs lack thumbs to call an ambulance. Moxie's love was pure and unwavering, and she would have grown thumbs for me if she could. Last month, Peter Gordon, an old friend of mine from elementary school, died. He had had a bone marrow transplant 17 years ago, so he had been on borrowed time, I suppose. But we didn't think about it. He was one of the most positive people I've ever known. We could reminisce about growing up in Lincoln, like the time the science teacher's boa constrictor escaped into the school's heating system. But we didn't really need to because we had our shared history in our hearts. My Uncle Frank is 95, and he's the last of my parents' generation. I am stepping into the older generation role now, like it or not. And as I do, I understand my mother and my mother-in-law better. They both lived into their late 90s. They lost many friends, first older friends and then younger friends. They became the only ones who held the memories, what it was like growing up during the Depression in Needham and their lives during the Second World War. If I could write to them, I would ask them how they managed so many losses of so many loves and of so much they loved and kept on going. I have a new puppy. Her name is Twilight. It's a crazy little thing called Love, but I call her Mabel. She is fond of me, but at this point, if I call her and there is something more interesting nearby, like some deer poop or a stick, she will ignore me. But I'm fond of her too, even if some days I think she's a lot of work and I really just want my Moxie back. I think I will never completely get over those I've loved and lost, and that's okay. My heart feels tender from the wounds, but it also feels good to continue to cherish them and hold the memories, even if I am the only one. Questions?
How do you come up with these great names?
Oh, for the dogs? Well, you mean their kennel names? So like a crazy little thing called Love. Her mother's name was Bohemian Rhapsody. and Moxie, Spoonful of Sugar, her breeder required that all the dogs have a Disney name. So, yeah. The breed, Tibetan Terriers. Yeah. Thank you. Oh,
So, if you grew up in Lincoln, what's your maiden name?
Parker.
Thank you. I remember when Mr. Webster lost his book.
Yeah, it was a big deal. Yeah. We girls screamed. Thank you.
I'm Nancy Henderson. He was tall, 17'3", and dark, mahogany bay, and oh so handsome. His name was Chief. When I was growing up in Lincoln, there were backyard horses in every neighborhood, and the 4-H riding ring on Weston Road had lots of action. I didn't discover horses, however, until my daughter Alexa was 5. She clearly remembers riding her first pony ride on Dana Robat's pony. Soon, I was standing around Verrill Farm in all kinds of weather while she had her riding lessons, and then I began to take riding lessons myself. I became the hands-on person for a pair of horses at Red Rail Farm, and I was allowed to ride them. But then I met Chief. Chief was a Hanoverian from Germany who had had a big show jumping career at the Grand Prix level, and he must have been magnificent flying over those jumps. In his middle years now, he was a pleasure horse for a gentleman also in his middle years, and I had no illusions of riding him. That would be way too far to fall for a relatively new rider like me. But I was asked to bring him in from the paddock and to meet the vet, the farrier, the teeth floater, to put his enormous blankets on in bad weather, and to give him some extra meals in the winter as he had difficulty keeping weight on in the cold. He would recognize my car from way across the field, and by the time I got to the gate with his halter, he had emptied his bladder, as he'd been trained to do before work, and was greeting me with a whinny. For an 1,800-pound animal, he was extremely considerate and careful around smaller beings like me. We developed a bond of trust between us, and although I was associated with things like shots and worming paste and soaking a painfully abscessed hoof, I was also Mrs. Lunch. When a horse and rider train together over a long period of time, they develop deep communication through voice, touch, balance, and breath. We had 3 of those, and I admit we spent a lot of time standing and just breathing together, a kind of silent conversation. Chief was majestic and loyal, and I loved him very much. I am so happy that in his final chapter, he found a bold and generous rider who engaged his mind with new challenges, taking him to hunter pace events and even jumping a height of 3'3" at the age of 24. He was a big horse who left a big hole in the hearts of those of us who knew him, and I was lucky to have been part of his life. And there we are. So, you can see. Oh, whoa, sorry, Chief. Oh, so you can see he was a bit taller than me. Yeah. Any questions? Ooh, after our business got busy and I couldn't do the afternoon shift, probably 5 more years. So I think I knew him almost a decade. And then Stephanie took over for another 5 years. So, yeah. No, probably more like 26, 27. Yeah. I didn't. So I took up riding as an adult, and my daughter assured me that I wasn't going to have the muscle memory that she had, for instance. And I looked way up. I mean, his withers were over my head. And the reason that his show jumping career had ended was he'd gotten the wobbles, which is kind of a muscle. So he was a little undependable. Now, Stephanie is the bravest woman I know. So she took him over jumps. She gave him the confidence to do what he used to do. And I know that it meant a huge deal to him to get a piece of his old life back. And then, of course, being lavished by people like me. So.
Is Corey here? I didn't see him come in. Okay, he's probably doing tile duty. Sorry?
it's not Valentine's Day, but we'll pretend. My name is Steve Cropper, and I start to say, men, don't be cheap. Pay for dinner or drink. The wage differential remains 83 cents on the dollar. Sure, it's up from 69 cents. But men, don't be cheap. If you're dating a professional woman, ask. Women have low standards for men. Thank heavens. A woman said to me once, if a man wears a button-down shirt, remembers what I said an hour or 5 minutes ago, is not a drunk and can hold a job, he's in the 95th percentile. The first date, maybe every date, should be exceptional. Imagine if somebody asked you where you met and you had to say Starbucks. What kind of a story would that be 10 years later? So, I recommend a silent date in a building that inspires awe. There's a monastery in Memorial Drive, which had been one of my favorite locations, and you agree not to talk for 15 minutes, which is astoundingly intimate, being with somebody you've never met before, and you're forced to merely have body language and eye contact. Sometimes felt a little more intimate than if you were naked. My other favorite locations, Mount Auburn Cemetery, which windows out the Queasy, the MFA, a sculpture garden, any one in particular you might know about, and the Rose Garden in the Fenway. Again, if you're going to have a date, it should be memorable. We've gone through a process before COVID discussing consent, which is really good, and then COVID happened and we were all distant, and so what do we do now? So I know many of us after that, maybe we go to church to get hugs, and we hope that the people around us feel safe and we can be close that way. But I had a date with a woman once, and she described her life in the last 5 years, and it says, it sounds like you just escaped from 5 years of a sexless, loveless marriage. She laughed, a little uncomfortably, and I said, I can tell that you're hungry for touch and warmth and play. That's wonderful, you deserve it all. I'm not in that phase, however. And so I say, more power to you. Thank you. Breaking with the convention, where protection beats consent. I was coming out of a theater one night late with a woman, crossing the parking lot. It was dark, and a man approached us in what I thought was a threatening fashion. First date with this woman, didn't know her, but I put my hands on her shoulders, steered her across the path, and walked away. It was one of those beautiful moments when we both knew what was happening, and it was okay for me to move into a protective role without having consent beforehand. It was sort of a human convention that worked. On another first date, I was asking a woman about life, and do I ask her about her divorce or not? Started asking a little bit, tears came, and I stood up, walked over her side and gave her a big hug. And again, beautiful moments when humanity trumps convention. It was, I think, appropriate. Last 2 points. I was at the Wang Center with a friend of mine, a woman, not a romantic, and I noticed a smile all the way across the hall, a smile that was very attractive to me. And so I went to the usher, and I wrote in the back of my business card, I said, your smile, your worldview, I'll leave this in your hands. And I gave $10 to the usher, and he delivered it. It just felt like a 19-something or other romance. Last thing, keeping love alive. Left under my pillow before trips, chocolate, a shell, a jet airplane, a love note. Love notes left in my luggage everywhere, every pocket of the luggage, in my underwear, in my shaving kit, so that when I'm on the road, I would be reminded. So, thank you. Are there any questions about love?
I want to know what happened with the business card.
So the business card was delivered. I watched it gleefully from a distance as the usher went over, and I just had to look out of the corner of my eye as it was received, and she looked around looking for the person. She did end up calling me. The date was not a good date. It was not successful, but that's not an important part of the story. Any other questions? So I recommend, especially for the men, I'm sorry, somebody asked a question, so I'm answering the question. We menfolk don't know as much about context in romance as the counterparties. And long ago, I read a romance novel, just one, and I realized that we men were so outclassed, so unaware of everything that happens on a date usually. So think of context, and thank you for listening.
Hello, Barbara Slater. And before you start timing, let me ask you a question. Does everyone here know what it means to be a Green Beret? All right, part of the U.S. Army Special Forces. Okay, the title of my story is How on Earth Did I Come to Share My Home with a Green Beret for 3 years? And this is how it happened. It was in the mid-1980s. My first husband and I had separated, and we were headed for a divorce. My two daughters, Gwen and Tricia, were in college, and Stephen, at 14, and I were at home in a big, old Victorian house. And he was at the age of, where are you going? Out. What are you doing? Nothing. And I wasn't exactly Miss Mary Sunshine myself. So I thought, we have this third floor with a bathroom and a nice bedroom up there. We need to get someone in it. And I found out about a woman who had an agency in which she placed graduate students in people's homes. And I contacted her and I said, look, what I need is someone who'd be willing to throw a football or throw a frisbee or play a game of chess or checkers with a 14-year-old, do some odd jobs around the house, and just have a nominal rent. I said, okay, I'll see what I can do to find someone for you. So a couple days later, she called back and she said, gosh, I think I have just the perfect person for you. I said, great, tell me about him. Well, he's 28. Fine, old enough to have some sense, but also young enough to be a big brother type. And he's starting law school in Boston. Oh, perfect, I thought. That would be great. He's been married and he's now divorced. Okay, I understand that. And he has a 2-year-old that he'd like to have visit, maybe 2 weekends out of a month. So, okay, I like kids, that'd be just fine. And I think she took a deep breath, he's at Fort Devon, and he's leaving the Army. He's a West Point graduate, and he's a Green Beret. And I said, absolutely not. I am not going to have some man in my house proselytizing for the special forces and persuading this 14-year-old that this is the future career he needs. No way, not going to happen. Well, we went back and forth a bit on that. And she said, finally, look, would you just meet him? I think you would really like him. Just meet him. I said, well, all right, I will just meet him, but I don't want to meet him in my home. He can come to my office. I was teaching at Clark. I had an office, and we agreed that he would come to my office. And a couple days later, Jim turned up at my office. Well, she was right. We hit it off immediately. He came and he lived with us for 3 years. He did not proselytize. He could throw a mean frisbee or a football. I tell you, he could put a Christmas tree up with one hand tied behind his back, and he could shovel out the driveway, shovel, in a flash. We really enjoyed his company, his presence, and really just about everything about him. He married after finishing law school. Gwen and I went down to his wedding, which is in the chapel at West Point. We still keep up with him. And the moral of this story is don't prejudge people, even a Green Beret. Any questions? There are probably lots, but you can answer. Yeah, Rachel? Pardon? Oh, just fine. We both liked him a lot. He was a really wonderful presence in our household. Very competent, very confident, cheerful, a can-do kind of person. He was really terrific, and they got along well.
Did you ever talk about his military service?
Very little. I think it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue or that he wanted. To some extent, I regret that. But at that point in my life, that was not where I was. We did meet his family, I mean his parents, and we had a very cordial relationship. It was a good one. And although it's occasional now, it's still good.
My name is Edwin Elinema, and I wanted to. Oh, I thought. All right. I thought I was going to share with you the story about me being a foreigner here in the U.S. One is most impactful story, and another one is most funniest story. When the opportunity to come here in the U.S. arrived, I was very excited. And one of the main reasons was because in the U.S., there's a significant amount of black population. So I felt like I'll be able to blend in a little bit and I won't be sticking out like a sore thumb. So I came and was a student, undergrad and graduate school, and I started working. Fast forward 26 years later, George Floyd was killed. And that created this moral consciousness in all of us. And at work, there was all these discussions and meetings about how to deal with the whole problem. And later at work, they said, we are going to deal with not only the Black Lives Matter issue, but also the DEI issues. At last, they said, we will have an investigation on the equity issues at work, and we'll address that. So I thought, well, this is just one of those corporate things that everyone says, but nothing will come out of it. 2 years later, my boss and my boss's boss called me in the office, and they told me that there has been some kind of evaluation and comparison on DEI-related issues, and for this reason, you will have extra amount of money on your income. So it means you have been disfranchised for all this time and therefore will improve your income to this level. So I was elated, I was very happy, and I came home, and that evening I started being very sad and depressed. I started thinking about 26 years of work and what has happened in all the careers I've had and all the promotions I might have missed, bonuses and all that. And I thought, well, I thought this was supposed to be a happy thing, but it's not. I'm missing my notes here. So, 2024, we had an election, and we have a policy that is trying to cut off DEI. And I said, oh my goodness, I thought this is okay now, we are doing fine. The only problem I thought was when I was first in college, where I went to the bookstore looking for school supplies, and I started buying pencils and pens and things like that. And I went to ask for one of the employees there, where do you guys keep the rubber? And say, oh, you're looking for rubber? He said, yes. And she said, well, I'm sorry, we really don't have rubbers around here. You'll have to go to the health center. So I said, this is strange. Why do I have to go to the health center for rubber? So when I got there, the receptionist told me to wait for a nurse. And the nurse came, and we went to this little room, and we had to discuss a little bit. And she said, what did you want the rubber for? I said, I just wanted something to erase and the pencil. She said, oh, in this country, we call that eraser.
What was your job, Edwin?
I'm a systems engineer for back-end systems, computer systems.
Did you finally resolve your sadness with all that had happened and stuff? How did that get resolved in your mind?
I'm still struggling. I'm still struggling. I think we are all, in a way, struggling, but I'm hopeful. Yeah. Thank you.
So I just wanted to report that Corey is sick. I just texted him, and they all have the flu, and he's been in bed all day. So he said next time he'll be back. And now we're going to have a double whammy from the Buells, A and B. They get 6 minutes.
We don't have any props and we don't have any notes. Shucks.
So you want me to go first? Okay. So the time, well, first of all, the topic.
Who we are.
Yes. I'm now audible. So our title is Lost in Translation, or Beware of trying to tell jokes in a foreign language unless you really, really know the language. So the time is 1962 or thereabouts. The two of us have been married a year. We have vamoosed for Taiwan out of a combination of wanderlust, Peace Corps impulse, and just curiosity. So we're teaching English at Chinese University, studying Chinese, really proud of how quickly we're coming along in the second language. But first my problem, and then Kim will tell hers. So Chinese is full of expressions, 4 character expressions that are like proverbs, Ben Franklin-ish sayings. Time flies. There's time flies like an arrow. There's an exact counterpart in Chinese. But one that charmed me during early days of lessons was Ren Lao Xin Bu Lao. Literally, the person is old, but the heart is young. Okay, so looking for ways to use it. I'm in this little minibus that takes faculty up from their condos to where we teach. And alongside, sturdily trudging, is an oldish, younger than I am now, but oldish woman, also named Buell. There's this older couple named Buell, the old Buells and the young Buells. That was us. And I look out and say, Ren Lao Xin Wu Lao. And my Chinese colleagues in the minivan, utterly silent. Turns out that this expression has a sexual connotation. So, egg on my face. And now for an even more portentous story.
A little contexting. He got very good at Chinese, and he still wakes up, and I get up and he's reading ancient Chinese poetry and translating it. So it's tonal, which is another thing, it has 4 tones. He's got a good ear. Same syllable, 4 different tones, 4 different words. Anyway, I fumble along. You have to use Chinese. Our students are all Chinese. We're teaching in English because they're English majors, and they've been studying Chinese ever since elementary school, but of course they haven't had any native speakers. That's where we came in, these young people who didn't know anything except English. So we're teaching them Shakespeare and whatever. But we had to use Chinese to get around. So we had a Chinese tutor, and she was wonderful. We both had the same tutor. So we've been there 2 years. We've done our thing. We've had a great time. We live in a neighborhood filled with Chinese, Taiwanese friends and neighbors, and it's time to say goodbye. So there's a closing banquet, and it's very formal. and we have to give a speech as our farewell. So, ooh, I've worked on my speech so hard with my tutor, and I'm standing there, and I look out, and it's not a group like this. It's all men in dark blue silk robes waiting for my speech. And I practiced it, and I'm ready. And I happened to be 3 months pregnant. We decided we would start our family. And I didn't look very pregnant, but I'd been fainting around, so people kind of got the word. And so I give my talk, and I think I'll throw in a little joke at the end, which I have not cleared with my tutor. Now, you know how on the back of dishes and things it'll say made in China or made in Taiwan? So this is Taiwan zuoda. Zuoda means made in Taiwan. So my closing shot is, I will never forget our 2 years here because our first child was Taiwan zuoda. Well, looking out at the crowd, a deep breath, not a chuckle. And I thought, well, I guess I blew that one. So that was that. We had banquet. My tutor comes up to me and says, Kim, do you know what you said? And I said, Taiwan's water? That means your child is a bastard. What a nice finale. Any questions?
Maybe the stories speak for themselves.
Don't tell a joke in a second language.
Wow, everybody must have really kept on their 3 minutes because we've done this very quickly. Anybody from the audience that would like to tell an off-the-cuff story right here, right now? You have a captive audience or a love story that you'd like to share. All right. Henry. Are you ready for this, Nina? No.
Nothing to do with Nina. This is short, but it takes off on the Buells. My wife and I at the time were in Peace Corps training actually, and it was in New Mexico, but they sent us for a couple of weeks across the border so we could be immersed in Spanish speaking in Mexico. And they put us we were working through the local Los Leones, the Lions Club in Juarez, Mexico, and they put us in these little houses, divided us up among the whole community, so we each had a place to stay. And Julie was her name. Julie and I were put in this really nice house, and we had a week and a half of Spanish at that point. And so we hung out with the family and tried to understand what was going on, and then both of us were exhausted. And finally, we really had to go to bed, and I finally said, thank you very much, pero estamos muy casados, which means not we are very tired, which would be cansados. It means we are very married and need to go to bed.
Well, I'm going to tell a really quick story, and I didn't plan on this. I didn't plan on it, but it's a follow-up. A while back, I gave a story about doing a lot of family research and genealogy, and I talked way too long, and I apologize for that. But I want to just tell you a follow-up to that. Last March, I was filling out a questionnaire from the Boston Tea Party ship about my ancestors because they wanted to do an article about my father's namesake, Lendell Pitts. And so I'm sitting at my desk, RL is not home, my dog is at my feet, sound asleep, and I hear, sounded just like that. And I thought, what the heck is that? So I walk around the house, and there's a cardinal flying into my bedroom window over and over and over again. So I thought, mating dance of a cardinal. He sees his reflection. He thinks, oh boy. Well, it went on for a day, and then 2 days, and yesterday was 1 year that he has flown into my window. He starts in my bedroom at about 6:15 in the morning and then ends up in the laundry room. He sort of follows us around the house. And so a friend of mine had looked up cardinals, and because I didn't think to do this, my father was a tremendous birder, I might add. And so she looked it up, and evidently cardinals are a very spiritual bird, and that very often it's sending a message from the beyond to try to get a message to you. So my assumption is that it's my dad saying, thanks so much for really looking into the family genealogy and all those notes I took that you're sharing, or not so much. So thank you for letting me share that. It's just, anytime you want to come up to my house, come see him. He's absolutely beautiful, and I can't imagine a year of hitting a window and still being, I even tried putting a towel over it and everything, and he still came back. I named the bird Lendl after my ancestor, so we refer to, is Lendl here yet today? And he's also my father's name. No, well, there is one that shows up periodically, but she's not there every day, and certainly not at the window. But there's some days where he just sort of goes up over the sill and just looks in and looks around, and the minute he sees you, he disappears for a while. But it's just fascinating. Yes. Clearly, yeah, he's flying into the window. I actually have some video if anyone wanted to watch it, but he doesn't appear to be hurt at all, and I don't know what quite to do. I did ask a woman I met from Audubon, and she said, oh, it's nothing spiritual. It's just a bird flying into the window. So I was very disappointed. Yes, Jonna? It's so funny. My dog goes up and he watches him, and it's like, I got to get at this bird, but he doesn't. Yes.
In folklore, there are many, many stories about how birds connect heaven and earth. Yes. So I think it is your father, and it's connecting you.
So that was saying that birds do connect heaven and earth, and so maybe it is. My cleaning lady suggested that I have a medium or somebody come in and try to get the message. So I'll let you know part 2 at our next Sip Talk Learn if I do find one. So thank you all for being here today. Eat up what's left, and I will be in touch through the website and news briefs and everything about whether we have another one in April. Oh, hi, Lendl. All of a sudden, the microphone just has shrunk down to my level. But thank you all for being here, and we'll look forward to year 7 next year.